Or any discussion on any items of the consent agenda? And Bruce, you had mentioned you had a couple of questions.
Just general questions about the financial statement. It seems to be a lot going on with the financial statement in the sense that we have items that are like the unbudgeted items that aren't posted to revenue yet, I'm assuming, like the ones that you listed on the bottom of the page. But I guess my basic question is, how do you feel that we're gonna end up at the end of the year? We're gonna have a budget surplus like I would anticipate, or are we going to be looking at?
Yeah, so thus far this year, I think we're holding pretty well, if not slightly, we'll say in the black in terms of ending up with a budget surplus. Because of the larger items that we do have the unbudgeted purchases, we do plan on bringing back a budget amendment at the end of the year to kind of square things up, so that way in the future, we're not trying to remember why Parks Department was $1 million over budget.
The posting of those entries, are we not doing that because we should adjust the budget first, like the park building that we purchased and the truck? Why they're not posted to revenue yet, or?
Yes, so the the Parks building, I would guess that we're waiting until the end of the year, quite frankly, on some of those to kind of just square up the books. Say the plow truck was an unbudgeted expense because we thought we were gonna end up paying for it in 22, so we never worked it into the 23 budget. And so we just haven't squared that off on the backside, is that correct?
We allocate the assigned funds at the end of the year.
Microphone?
Oh, yeah, she said we allocate the assigned funds at the end of the year instead of doing them on a exactly as they come through basis.
Sure. You can kind of understand why it's difficult, for me anyway, to understand where we're gonna end at the year when we're showing a loss of $1.8 million through end of October.
Yes.
And we can do the gymnastics and add back $1.3 million, $4 million or something back to it, and we're still showing a loss. And I understand things will come through, but I'm just trying to get an idea. Are we gonna be plus a couple $100,000, plus $300,000? What's your guess?
I guess I would have to look at that. I mean,
We're 78% of the year complete on expenditures without those expenditures. And year to date, we'd be at 83%. So we have, I don't have the exact dollar amount for you. Off the top of my head, I can within moments after being off the microphone. But we're essentially that, 9% below year to date expected expenditures if we remove those ticketed items that the revenue hasn't been transferred yet. So like the third asterisk on the bottom of that page.
Right.
Does that help at all?
It does. I'm just trying to get an understanding of, if we're gonna have a budget surplus, that's something I'd kinda like to know before we approve the budget for the levy approval.
Sure.
If we have extra money, and we normally do, it seems, have extra surplus at the end of the year, and that might affect how much we'd wanna levy, or at least take that in consideration. And I understand the interest income, you're not divvying that up yet for the general fund, but I'm sure we'll be over budget in that category as an example. And some other ones.
With some of those, and we'll get of note with some of those, and we can get that exact number. There are some of them that were budgeted for 23 that didn't end up getting spent in 23. One that I can think of is our Parks Board budgeted for sidewalk expansion that we ended up holding off on because we're trying to get grants to pay for some of those instead of having that exact bill. And so that allocated amount is getting pushed to 24. And that's just one example I'm thinking of. But yeah, we can get you definitely a better number, so that way you guys can take that into account with the final budget numbers.
So as an example, a plow truck expense that was expensed this year, was that in the budget for this year, even though it was in the budget last year as well?
So we originally put that in the budget for 22 because we bought it, I believe, like January of 22. It didn't get delivered until 23. We were almost certain we were going to get that delivered in 22, so we never actually worked it into the 23 budget, which is why it's showing as an unbudgeted expense right now. So we budgeted those funds in 22, we just didn't end up paying them out until 22.
Right, did we put the money aside then, or did we
Yes.
just, oh, you did?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so we keep track of that money and put it aside.
So it wouldn't affect this year's budget at all?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Bruce?
Nope.
So moved.
So,
Second.
getting, so that was a motion to approve the consent agenda. We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. City engineer project update. Is Chris with us this evening?
I'll say I'm here.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening, everybody. So I have a couple things with you. The first is my standard project update. I'm not going to get too far into this unless there are questions. And if there aren't, then I'll get into the next item in the agenda. So with that, moving on to the item on the 2024 project. The 2024 street utility project, a portion of this project is on the MnDOT state aid system. That includes First Street Southeast, and it is the staff's preference to maintain the existing street width on First Street Southeast, which currently does not meet the minimum street widths as required by MnDOT. So MnDOT has a list of design standards, and if that was to be met, the road would have to be 34 feet wide from face of curb to face of curb. The variance that you have with you today is to allow the street to be maintained at its existing width, which is 30 feet 6 inches, 30 and a half feet face to face. This is a residential street. It is not seeing the commercial traffic that the remaining portion of First Street Southeast further to the east sees, and we don't want to encourage larger vehicles to start taking this route. So what you have is a variance, which will be submitted to a resolution to support that variance, and that'll be submitted to MnDOT for their review and potential approval at their variance committee meeting in December. So, are there any questions for me on that?
This is a silly question, but will one of the curbs line up directly with the other curb on the other side, the residential side then?
Yeah, so the right-of-way on the east side of 7th is 6 feet wider than it is on the west. And that additional right-of-way is all on the north side of the street. So there is a little bit of a jog currently in the road alignment. The proposed road alignment is to move the curb line on both south and north side up north about 2 feet. So that the south curb line on the new street west of 7th would line up with the existing curb on the east side of 7th. And so it won't be perfectly centered, but the south curb line would be straight. With this, with the change in, with the street having now sidewalk on the south side, the additional 2 feet will provide a little more space to get that sidewalk to work. If it had to be additional 3.5 feet wider, it'd start pushing on that north side, because it would push the road north even further than we're talking about doing, shifting it to 2 feet. So yes, we would try to hold that south curb line, I guess.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, look to have a motion to pass resolution 2311-2001, a variance from standard for state aid operation for project number SAP 237-123-001.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Okay.
Real quick, if you don't mind. Any idea what the turnaround is on when we'll hear if that variance is approved?
Yes, the variance committee meets, what I have, December 14th. We should know that day or the day afterward if they'll allow it. So that is when we'll start our design work on First Street, once we know what the street width is going to be. But yeah, just December 14th, mid-December, we'll know.
Thank you.
That's all I got, unless there's anything else for me.
Oh, thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Great, thank you, everybody.
Next up for discussion is the Prague Outdoor Performance Stage Facility Recommendation from the Park Board. And I know, is Jonathan here? Want to make it again? Yes.
I'm Ken Gardner, the chair of the Hops Committee, and want to thank everyone for allowing us to present. Tonight, we have a great story to tell right now.
Dan,
One year.
do you want to hit the button on your mic right there?
It's green, that must mean it works. All right, you want me to start over with the brilliant beginning, or shall I go? All right. We have a great story to tell tonight about the POPs Committee and where we're at. And before Jonathan Nelson from Bolton and Mank does his presentation, I just wanted to give you guys a very quick update, which even is further updated from the summary you were sent last week that you received. We've been overwhelmed with community support for the project. We've only been raising money privately for a year, and the project itself is just 18 months old. As of the end of today, we're $1,200 short of $800,000 raised, and our goal was to raise $500,000 in the first year. So we've gotten more than 70 groups, individuals, families, businesses that have stepped forward so far with 3-year pledges, and our goal is $1 million, as many of you know. We want to build a multi-purpose facility to celebrate the arts, and that's all part of our mission statement. And Bolton and Mank will talk about the site study that they've done, but we truly understand that the decision is the city's in terms of their ability to help us in terms of providing the land and maintenance. So a couple of very quick things about the building itself. We're looking at something that's about 50 feet wide by 50 feet in depth, probably a storage area in the back. It'll need about a half acre, and that'll accommodate 500 plus people. Probably what's most exciting for the committee is that we had originally set our goal of possible construction to begin in the spring of 25, but based on everything that we know as of today, we're probably ready to break ground next fall already. So in a year, we'd be ready to go. And I'm only giving you that number or that time frame because I know it will not happen overnight, the decision on location and where ultimately POPs is built. But because we're at the number that we're at in pledges, I truly believe that we could do things as soon as put a foundation in and do some other planning in terms of the project, finish it in the spring to early summer of 25, and it actually could be ready to go if we've got a site by the summer of 25. So as we look forward and the collaboration with city staff has been just terrific so far. But I think there's two things that we would like to get an answer to, I would guess, somewhere down the road here in the not too distant future. And that is maybe getting a feeling from you guys, how much time you believe it's going to take to make a decision on the site. Is this something that's a year away? Is this 6 months away? What is that time frame? And secondly, we understand because this is a unique historic public-private partnership that we've been doing here for the last year, how is that going to affect the bidding process for construction and some of those kinds of things? So the theme we've used throughout this process for the last 18 months has been it's time, and we do have great momentum, and we certainly don't want to lose that momentum. And it's just a tremendous tribute to the city and the community and the people in New Prague that we've been able to raise $800,000 of the $1 million goal. So with that, I'm going to step aside and turn the program over to Jonathan Nelson from Bolton and Mank, and he can review the site report that he has done.
Let's see if I can get this.
Ken, can you refresh my memory? The park board has seen this feasibility study.
The park board did, yes.
But the council hasn't.
council has
Okay,
not at this
thank
point.
you,
That's why they
because
wanted to come
obviously
and
I've seen it
provide
before,
the back. Yes,
so.
Maggie, you've seen
All
it.
right.
But for benefit of probably really only Rick here tonight,
Okay,
for that matter, but
okay.
also the general public,
Yeah,
so.
okay, thank you. This is all too familiar.
I haven't seen it either, Rick, so we're in this together.
Get this to work here.
Nope, Josh.
Oh, that's mine.
Let's see here.
Can you unplug it?
Yeah. Let's see.
Plug the cable real quick.
Oh. Uh-huh.
Well, you're our senior IT guy.
It's a new computer, so I was hoping everything would work perfectly, but let's see. Okay. Well, thank you, council, for the opportunity to be here this evening and present the POPS facility site feasibility study. Just wanted to start out with a couple acknowledgements here, quick. First to Den and Steve and the rest of the POPS committee. Thanks for the opportunity to work with you guys on this project. If it's not clear to you yet, this is a very passionate group, and I mean you can kind of see that just by the fundraising success that you guys have had already. So it's always a fun process to be involved with when there's that passion involved. Certainly one of the more passionate groups that I've had the opportunity to work with. So want to acknowledge you all, and then also the city and staff for providing a lot of good background information, being engaged in the process, and helping throughout the whole process as well. As Dan mentioned, I'm Jonathan Nelson, landscape architect with Bolton and Mink, and I've been working with the POPS committee since about April on this site feasibility study. So just going to give kind of a quick overview of the process we went through here as part of the site selection study. Talk about the rankings of the 3 sites, and then kind of give a high-level look at the 3 sites that were under consideration. And then certainly happy to answer any questions that folks might have. So the process really started off similar to most planning efforts. We started off with a kickoff meeting, got the necessary stakeholders in the room together to talk about goals, kind of vision for the process, make sure we started off on the right foot. As I mentioned, the city really provided a lot of great background on the 3 sites under consideration. So we were able to review that and get a better understanding of the 3 sites. From there, we went with stakeholders to visit the 3 sites in person. So that was a nice cold day in April. There was a good number of committee members and city staff out there that day. Certainly we may have gone a little faster than we liked, but it was definitely windy and windy and cold out there. So, but it was really good to see the sites in person, see some of the issues and opportunities related to the 3 sites. We also discussed potential locations within those various properties where the facility might be sited during those visits. And then we also started looking at some of the criteria that were used to rank the sites through the site selection matrix that was distributed to folks, and able to start filling that out with some information, site-specific information there. From there, our Bolton and Mink team kind of took things, the information that we had thus far, and started working on massing studies and site concepts. So for each site, we developed 2 unique concept plans for the site, These were very important in determining not only what type of facility might be feasible in these locations, but also size of the facility, what kinds of crowds they could support, and also in developing some preliminary cost estimates for the 3 sites. From there, we also developed ultimately the site rankings that we'll look at, and then kind of that review and wrap-up process, which kind of encompassed the presentation to the POPs committee that we had at Geese and Brew that was also open to the public. So we got a lot of great feedback at that meeting from the public. And that was in August, and then September presented to the park board, and then here tonight at the council. So I'm sure everybody's familiar with the 3 sites under consideration. We have the Sliding Hill Skate Park site on the north end of New Prague, the city center site, kind of just at the west end of downtown, and the Memorial Park site within the existing Memorial Park, just near the ballroom there. Ultimately, there was 11 total site ranking criteria that were utilized to rank the 3 sites. And these criteria went beyond just criteria related to the site itself, things like topography, utilities, size, things of that nature, but also considered social, environmental, and economic considerations. So you can see the list here. I won't run through each one individually, but site-specific considerations, community-related considerations, things of that nature. When we look at all the 3 sites as they relate to those site ranking criteria, ultimately Memorial Park scored the highest, followed by the Sliding Hill Skate Park site, and lastly the city center site. So as we looked at the 3 sites, we wanted to kind of start at a very high level and then kind of work our way down to the site-specific considerations. So for each site, we looked at kind of this bird's eye level review, looking at what is the location of the site under consideration, how accessible is it to folks in the community, what are some of the adjacent uses that would support a facility like this, and how accessible is it to the rest of the community. And just for context, we have a 1/4 mile and 1/2 mile radius shown on these figures. That's generally about a walking radius that would be considered acceptable for a park facility. So just kind of give some context as we look at those higher level views of these sites. Then we also generated more of a site specific figure for each site. These were important in determining locations of existing utilities, proximity of some of those amenities, as well as some of the surrounding context related to available parking in the proximity of the facility, so opportunities for off-site parking, access, things of that nature, and then also topography within the site. The figure in the upper left there shows when we were out on site, we identified potential locations for the facility. Sliding Hill Skate Park was somewhat unique in that two separate locations were identified for potential for the facility. So for each of those locations, we developed a concept plan. Site A there you can see is generally bounded by Columbus Ave on the west side and the stormwater pond. And then site B there, that's kind of tucked between the parking lot, the skating rink, and the skate park. So from there, for each site, as I mentioned, we developed two concepts for each location. Concept A here, again, is focused on that lawn space near Columbus Avenue. Generally, this area would lend itself to a flatter lawn type installation. And the size would easily support that 500 person capacity that POPs was looking to accommodate. Concept B, the topography is going to lend itself more to kind of a more formal amphitheater, terraced amphitheater type installation. And this one falls a little bit short of that 500 person capacity. So based on that information, concept A was identified as the preferred concept. And from there, we took that concept and developed some rough cost estimate numbers for the site. I should note that the cost estimates were generally broken down into two phases. Phase one would be intended to be generally the performance stage structure itself, and any necessary infrastructure to support that, that building. Phase two would include generally the site improvements around that, including the spectator area, and any other amenities that would be included. And then just a high-level look at those ranking criteria specific to Sliding Hill Skate Park. That site ranked highest when it came to off-site parking, access to utilities, adjacent land uses, and size and capacity, and then scored lowest when it came to access to restrooms, topography, accessibility and community context, proximity of supporting businesses, and supporting park amenities. Next, the city center site. Again, it's kind of on the west end of that downtown core. It's generally a vacant site currently. I know that the city has, expressed interest in developing a more comprehensive plan for this site. So I think, that may be something that would need to be undertaken before, development could occur on this site. Generally, we developed two concepts for the site again. Concept A was developed based off of a concept plan that was provided by the city that was completed previously for the site. This concept generally identified a stormwater pond on the south end of the property and an opportunity for a mixed-use development building on the north side. So the performance stage generally takes placement in between these two amenities. And then concept B looks at kind of increasing density on the site, providing two buildings with the stage and spectator area, again, centrally located. Both of these facilities could easily accommodate that 500-person capacity and would generally be more of a flat lawn type installation. Of the two concepts, concept A was identified as the preferred concept, and the cost estimates, again, were generated. Another note on the cost estimates, as far as phase one improvements especially, the cost estimates are fairly consistent. Generally, we anticipate that, regardless of location, that facility would look somewhat the same. And so there might be minimal adjustments based on locations of utilities, ADA access requirements, things of that nature, but generally they're going to be fairly consistent. City center site ranked highest when it came to access of utilities, accessibility and community context, proximity of supporting businesses, and then overall size and capacity of the facility. And scored lowest when it came to off-site parking, restroom proximity, topography, vegetation, adjacent land use, and supporting park amenities. And then the last site under consideration, Memorial Park. Again, this is within the existing Memorial Park property, just on to the east of the downtown commercial core. Generally in the location of the existing horseshoe pits, the shade structure, and the sand volleyball courts. Again, kind of looked at bird's eye, high level look, more of a site specific look, and then developed those two massing concepts. Concept A in this case looks at placement of a stage, generally in the location of the existing shade structure there. Concept B looks at the stage, generally in the location of the existing sand volleyball courts. Based on feedback from the committee, concept A was identified as the preferred concept. And again, we generated those preliminary cost estimates based off that concept A. As far as Memorial Park, it ranked highest when it came to access to utilities, restrooms, topography, accessibility and community context, proximity of supporting businesses, supporting park amenities, and size and capacity. And then scored low when it came to on-site parking and adjacent land uses. So kind of gives a high-level look at kind of the process we went through, the results of the feasibility study, and some of the sites with that. Certainly happy to answer any questions folks might have.
Any questions at all?
Is this the, how many times it's gotta come up in front of us? Do we have to have hearings?
This can come before you as many or as few times as you'd like. I mean, I think it's certainly something you want to think about. I don't know, I would not recommend that you would try to make a decision tonight.
Right.
But it's certainly something that I know that at some point the POPS committee is gonna want a general direction one way or the other. So I'd certainly, not put it on the back burner for too long, but it's something to keep in mind as you consider, going in the future. And I know maybe Maggie might be able to share a little bit of what the park board discussed to kind of help guide your thoughts.
Yeah, and we looked at all three sites, and of course, we understand the concerns with some of the trees in the Memorial Park. Also noting that a lot of those are ash trees that are probably gonna be taken down anyway. We did a walkthrough, and we actually saw the trees that were marked to be taken down. And there are quite a few, unfortunately. But the park board also felt that there was a lot going on in Memorial Park, and to add one more feature, there could be some potential conflicts, causing multiple events to happen. So Sliding Hill, we discussed, was farther north from the city that it wouldn't draw people into the businesses at all. They'd come, they'd listen to this, whatever wonderful performance, and get in their cars and just leave. They wouldn't filter back into town to the restaurants and other amenities that we had. After further discussion, the park board fell on City Center as the site of choice. It's pretty much a clean slate. Any type of landscaping, is open. It would beautify the west end of town, and especially with the mill being purchased and possibly repurposed, it would bring obviously some beauty to that west end of town. And the park board also liked the proximity to other downtown amenities, that parking didn't seem to be a problem, especially at the hotel during the summer concerts that were given. People walked, people biked, people parked, and there didn't seem to be any issues. And so the park board felt that the city center would be, it's their choice, and I think the park board wants to present that into city council as their recommendation. Again, just to bring some added beauty to that part of town, bring in crowds that would filter into the restaurants and other amenities that the city has. As far as the restrooms, something like that could probably be in phases where to bring in portable potties, and eventually, get permanent restrooms. I mean, buildings are always, in phases, and so we can't have everything all at once. And as far as, other park amenities, if kids are at the concert and they don't have a playground, well, it's not the worst thing in the world. They can find other things to do, and it didn't seem to hurt any of the performances this summer at the hotel, so. But it was a lengthy discussion, I will have to say, that it was thoughtful discussion. So if you have any questions, let me know.
So the Parks Board picked City Center. Is there a steering committee that did? What was their choice?
Well, the
There wasn't a steering committee specifically, but what the POPS leadership team voted on was to approve the Bolton and Mink report and forward it on to the park board. The majority of the leadership team preferred Memorial Park, but I want to be clear that there were, and that's 15, 16, 17 people, but I want to be clear that there also were people on the leadership team who did prefer the other sites as well. But the majority did go along with the Memorial Park site.
Right. And then, like you say, the trees are ash, right? Because my biggest problem with Memorial would be all the trees, you know?
Right, yeah, that was a consideration. We walked through the park and got a very good vision of what trees would still be there and what would not. I think one of the other things that the park board discussed was the proximity to residential homes. And again, just felt that the city center offered a potential concept to maybe have the performance stage further toward the south, even though there are homes toward the north end, that it wasn't as close as the homes in Memorial Park. And we walked all the sites. I will have to, we walked and we discussed, and so we had a very good visual of what was there. So that's where we landed.
Thank you.
Would it be fair to say, Maggie, that the park board, the difference between Bolton and Minks and the park boards was the park board probably looked at the elements and weighted them differently or looked at them differently? Like the park amenities is more valuable to me than it was to you, obviously. So you looked at that differently when you made your recommendation?
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about that, especially about restrooms, the proximity to businesses, other things that people could do while they're listening to the performance. And there was a wide range of discussion, and there was some dissension, but ultimately, those people that felt a different site in their mind would work, that we came to the, what's the word I'm looking for, consensus of the city center. So there were people that felt other sites might work better, but as we kind of talked through it and, we had our rationale, that's where we landed. Ken, do you remember anything
Yeah,
differently?
I was gonna say, the other thing I would add to that discussion, and what I think really came to the top was, that is truly a, area that could lead to revitalization of, let's just say, the west end of downtown. We acknowledged in the motion that you'll see in the packet from the park board that it would take a master plan for that property to determine, what, if any, public amenities do we need there? I know City Hall's been talked about very generically. Is that or is that not something that needs to be there? And then what are the other amenities that could be there? Should we look at that for 55 and up housing? Can that be incorporated with the, POPs facility? And then we have that stormwater pond that we've kind of in some fashion need to work around there. So I think the park board recognized that we do need additional study on that property, but felt that that was really the big takeaway, was that could be a really great thing to complete on property that right now is kind of an eyesore.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, and I know that's been discussed before, but since I've been on city council, there's been no serious discussion about apartment or city hall or anything like that, so there would have to be a lot done before we get that far. I tend to look at it, and I totally am open to any site, and that's kind of what the POPs committee, we would like to see it happen. But I certainly would like to go through the analysis of what's the best for the city. And sometimes when we talk about the city center site, I think sometimes we're thinking about it as something that can help solve a different problem, which is legitimate, but not necessarily doesn't answer the question of which location provides the best opportunity for this to be a successful amenity for the city. And that's why, again, to park amenities, I might weigh it differently than other people in the park board or you, Maggie. But it's both valid perspectives on it. My concern, as I mentioned in discussions in the past, is just trying to get to an endpoint with the city center site. I can certainly visualize some very attractive things going on there, but I don't want it to be in limbo either, and I don't necessarily feel it should be I'm concerned that it might just end up being a destination site. If you don't have a lot of pedestrian traffic, if there aren't amenities for park amenities for, some people like the idea of being able to bring your family and have something for the kids to do and that type of thing. So if there aren't things that are there, I'm a little concerned about that location for those reasons. But can you explain, Ken or Josh, what would it have to take for that site to make it happen there?
To make this project happen here, I think from a staff perspective, like's been mentioned, we would certainly recommend going through a much larger master plan concept for that entire site. Whether you include the whole 2 blocks, or maybe you bleed it off and you start grabbing other properties that potentially get folded into it. I do think you would want to put together and have a very thoughtful city-led discussion of how do we view this site being used. That way, should everyone decide to move forward with, say, the city center site, we know that, okay, this is getting designed in a way, and it's gonna look like it's right in the middle, but it's because there's future plans, then we know kind of how we're gonna use that backside. I do think any of these sites, really, we'd wanna get into the city really figuring out, is there other things that we envision a site being used for, and taking those into account before we move any dirt to make sure that we're not positioning this to get in the way of something else that could be done. So my recommendation would be if everyone today said I could see this going on the city center site, we'd want to start planning, okay, how are we going to jump into this master planning process for the whole area over there?
I think I understood what you said, but a timeline for that, is it practical to think that we could decide upon what other uses might be and actually change zoning and go through the comprehensive plan and do all those things?
So we are working through the comp plan process right now. It might almost be beneficial at that point to just kind of hire them to do a very specific area plan as kind of the comp plan process. And then it would be, in that case, if we went through that process, it would be hiring MSA to work with us to help. They do plans like that all the time for very specific areas. I know when we were talking to them initially, I think they even talked about potentially doing one for the mill area. And it's working with city councils to really envision this area and do a deep dive. We'd probably have a workshop or two, if not more, on that. And they'd really lead that whole process to help us figure that out. So would it happen tomorrow? No, but they generally are, they do it all the time, and so they would be able to lead us through that process faster than you could probably imagine it.
And that would include public or private development of the other property that's there?
And that would be really up to us. Yeah, whether we want to work with existing property owners, whether the city wants to maybe try to acquire some property, maybe through the EDA to spur further development. That would be up to the city and working with adjacent landowners of how much land or properties we actually want to include in that process.
And you see this happening in 9 months, or what timeline do you see this happening?
If the city decided in the next month, we'll say, that it wanted to go forward with that, I could certainly see it happening before 24 is out. Like, I would imagine us engaging pretty quickly with it, and it would be shocked if come July, we were still working on it. But maybe Ken's got different experience. I know he's been a planner longer than I have.
No, I think with the comp plan in process right now, I think the timing is great for that to be incorporated, hopefully before we get an end product that, you know, we're looking in that February timeframe, March maybe at the latest to get that wrapped up. I think it's good that we're working on that, Bruce, so we're not, you know, getting a comp plan and then coming back and amending it. So from that standpoint, it works great. Yeah, I think it really, decisions that have to be made is, do we envision a city hall being here? Well, if you look at the preferred concept that Jonathan had showed, it showed just a mixed-use building on the north end of that property. Does that need to be city hall, or can that just be, do we open it up for development proposals from a private developer and say, hey, we've got an acre and a half of land here. Just know that you're gonna have a stormwater pond in the south end of that property, and then a, you know, POPs facility north of that. That would maybe be an enticement for that private development. We gotta determine, are we gonna do, we've talked about it, does City Hall end up being here? Do we need that for public amenity? I don't think we've made that decision yet, so that's probably the bigger decision to be made from a council level, in my opinion.
Do you have a sense of cost on rolling that into the comp?
No, I haven't. I wanted to kind of get feedback here tonight. If there was an inkling of interest, we could go back to MSA as they're working on the comp plan. Like I said, I think up front they had mentioned, I don't know, I think it was $15,000-$20,000 up front to do that. But I would like to revisit, say, hey, specifically if we look at, we'll just say that couple block area from Main Street to Second Street, bounded by the railroad on the west, and then Second Avenue on the east side. And just get a little more specific, proposal on what they would charge for that.
Well, I think it's worthwhile looking into because something has to happen with that piece of property. It just can't stay a gravel, dirt-covered, weed-infested piece of property, to try to get some idea of what that can be used for.
I totally agree, although it's really worked to our benefit. I think it's been a great staging area for our construction, and it's saved us a lot of money over the last 2 years, 3 years with, as a staging point for the road
Right,
construction.
but the residents that live over there, they're subjected to dust and ugly, so that's not fair to them, that we've got this dumping ground in their front yard.
And kind of like Ken said, I mean, I do think at some point, whether some sort of outdoor performance facility goes there or not, it'd probably be a good idea from the city's perspective to do this exercise anyway, so that we can kind of figure out what we want to do with the property. Or I know a lot of times developers are looking, like, they like that guidance because they say, okay, we know the city's kind of looking at putting housing here or office building or whatnot. So then they feel much more comforted if I bring this idea to the city's already kind of talking about this than kind of coming in blind. Because when you come in blind, you have no idea what the city council's gonna throw back at you. You may go to all that work and find out they don't want whatever you're proposing. So, and at some point, I'd recommend going through this exercise for city center anyway.
I would too, because, we're still wondering what we're gonna do about a mail, or a post office,
I would agree. From here, Josh, I was a little surprised at the park board's action just because there was a different direction than Bolton Mink study and what the POPs committee group, the majority of them supported. So how do you feel, Josh, that we should take this?
My recommendation would be to sit on this and we can talk about it again at the next meeting, but that way it allows you guys to think a little bit. And then we can kind of square up our direction at the next meeting a little bit and see, is there any other information that you guys need? Or would you like Ken and I to reach out? And I mean, by that time, Ken and I can even talk to MSA and just, we can get an exact quote on what it would look like and what they think an estimated timeline would be if we were to kind of explore a more area plan for this small area.
Yeah, and I think it's in all fairness to have Mayor and Sean here, so hopefully we would have all council members to weigh in on it.
All right, so you need action of any kind then?
Not tonight.
It doesn't sound like it unless
No.
there's something specific other than reaching out to MSA that you would like us to do before the next meeting.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile to get a rough estimate of what something like that would cost. I think that might help our conversation at our next meeting.
Yep, and an idea of how we wanna approach using that lot. I mean, that lot could be used for a lot of useful things. And as long as we're ripping down them trees in Memorial Parks.
Well, and the other issue to bring more clarity to, how serious do we need that water retention area that we've been talking about forever? And was the reason the city bought the property in the first place? How serious is that? Do we need it? And if we're not gonna get grant money for it, are we eventually gonna do it one way or the other?
And
I think we have pipe in the ground, and Matt's probably more of an expert on exactly what we got in the ground there, but we do have a pipe, I think, that runs through there and basically is just going right to the creek right now.
Yeah, there's actually bulkheaded dead ends of the pipe that are ready for the pond to be put in. The pond needs to go in, some sort of pond needs to go in there. That is the number one reason we have flooding in that area, because the piping down Main Street, down Second Avenue isn't spurting into the creek fast enough that you need to have that pond area to have a retention area. So it is, and there's actually a grant that just came out a couple of weeks ago, Ken, that we were looking into applying for.
Okay,
We are still in the process of hopefully trying to get grant money for it.
right. That's what I've been hearing for, ever since I was involved in selling the property to the city 10 years ago, whenever that was, that the city was hoping to get grant money to do that, and it just never happened.
Yeah, we were trying to shoot for innovative grant funds, which, infiltration and all that isn't seen as innovative then, 10 years ago even, as it had been, 5 years prior to that. So it just never rang true in that whole process. But yeah, I mean, I think regardless of getting grant money, there's benefit and seeing how big it needs to be. I mean, you can bury ponds, you can put them in chambers, you can do a number of different things.
Right.
And make it
Yeah,
developable.
that's why I think this process we should do regardless, because
Yep.
what I visioned that pond being, and maybe somebody else, and what Bolton Mink put in there, I thought was a little small from what I thought it was gonna be, so
Old
I
Mink
just
actually,
really,
the concept design that was preferred is actually almost exactly what was in the SEH concept. So that fit very well,
so that is the size it should be? Okay,
at least for what was initially designed at that point to be an open infiltration basin with some water quality benefit from it, yes.
okay. It's kind of a lot smaller than I originally envisioned then, because now one of the concept plans showed a building on either side of it, which originally in the discussion.
Oh,
wasn't
that
gonna be.
one where it shows two buildings, that
Yeah.
would have been a different design than what SEH had put into it.
Okay,
But the one where it just showed one building in the north, that was very similar to what we had.
people are thinking our historical New Prague where there's ducks flying into it, and we're not talking about a pond.
Well, we'd
Right.
want it to look as attractive as possible, I think, in that
Right.
location.
And that's where Ken mentioned, I mean, you see people anymore undergrounding ponds, so that way you can build on top of them. So I mean, I think that would partially come out of the discussion as how much money do we want to spend on this and what do we want it to look like?
Right, and so it's good that we do this anyway, because are we talking about something that's gonna hold water only 1 day a year, 2 days a year, or is there ever gonna be water in it and that type of thing?
Any other discussion? Okay, if not, thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the public is invited to be heard on matters not on the agenda. Is there anyone here that would like to speak? And if so, come to the podium and state your name and address. And your comments are limited to 5 minutes. And if there's anyone online that would like to provide comment. Do we have anyone online? Okay. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, then
12A.
all right, yes, general business. The enterprise fund budget presentation.
Yes, so I guess I will kind of open this here. So, I know the last couple of years, our truth and taxation meeting has been much longer because we've kind of done presentations not only of all of the budgets and kind of talked through the highlights of the year. So I wanted to split that up a little bit. Tonight you will be hearing from our enterprise funds, which namely are utilities, electric, water, sanitary, and storm sewers, and the golf funds, and then I'll do a quick highlight on the ambulance. This is both going to be a presentation of how the year has gone, kind of how those departments may see next year's going, as well as a discussion on their proposed budget. So this would certainly be the time if you've got questions on certain departments' budgets to ask them. We aren't looking to approve any of these budgets tonight, so the approval will come the second meeting in December when we approve all of the budgets. So with that, if you could hit my computer and floor is yours, Kurt.
All right.
How you doing, Kurt?
No more than 45 minutes, please.
Got a lot of stuff here, so, no, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
There we go, green. Thanks for the opportunity here. My name's Kurt Reeling. I own Golf Professional Enterprises, which currently holds the management contract for the New Prague Golf Club. A lot of our information is based on hospitality. That could keep me up here for a couple hours, but we won't do that. A few highlights on the season. In my mind, I've been doing this since 1990. Just recently, actually this year, became a quarter-century club member of the PGA of America, and I thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to kind of work my craft here in my hometown. Couple quick highlights. Memberships was one of the biggest things. We were able to increase our membership from last year by 60, which hasn't really happened in the in the near past here. So we were very happy with that. We had a lot more people, a lot more activity from them, a lot more questions to answer, things like that. But we're going to end the season just over 31,000 rounds of golf. As far as the season goes, the Minnesota season is April 1st through October 31st, which is 214 days, no matter what. This year, we actually finished yesterday, was our last golfing day of the season. We have some things to take care of. And we had 221 days this year, so it was a week longer than normal. Had some good play in November, so that was all kind of gravy there. But a few of the highlights are on the, they're on the sheet here that I think you had a chance to look at. Like I said, the rounds have been up. It's third consecutive year that we've had 30,000 plus. Due in part, way back to the COVID years. That was actually, I've been on the management staff since 2011. 2020 took over the company that I had worked for to do it individually. That was the year of COVID, which was very interesting, but we maintained it enough that year to spark interest, and this will be our third year in a row of over 30,000 rounds, which is very good, and you can see it in the numbers as well. This year, we added 4 additional events that we had never had before, and they came from area golf courses. Doesn't matter where they came from, but the biggest reason for them to come to the New Prague Golf Club, they said, was customer service, and pretty happy, pretty proud of that. I've always told my staff, can't make people come to the golf course, but we can make them come back. And so these 4 events that we added generated over $20,000 of revenue that we basically received just for treating people right. The golf course was in great shape this year, which will explain some of those utility costs in June and July, but Jeff Pint, the superintendent, and their staff, they just do a great job, and last few days he's gonna do some additional aerification. That's where the water, that's what makes the water work, some of the behind the scenes things. Like I said, the membership was up 60 players. A number of them, which is very encouraging, were what we call our young adult memberships, which is an age of 23 to 35, and that gives me very good outlook on the future. And then on the other side of that, we had nearly 120 kids in our junior program. So I really, really like the feeder, so to speak, situation that the facility's in. We had, you can see on the second line there, that's a typo on mine there. We did have a new course record set, which for those of you that don't golf, it's just the lowest score ever recorded at the golf course happened this year. It was actually 62, not 61, so if anybody knows Dan Gullickson, don't pat him on the back for the 61, because he missed a putt on the last hole. No. So that was pretty cool. That same week we had a hole-in-one on Tuesday, 2 of them on Wednesday. Course record broke on Thursday, so I had to give the ground staff a hard time to kind of toughen up the course a little bit. But other than that, with these increased number of play, we've been able to show what I feel are some very positive revenues. It's always in my back of my mind, in our mind, that we don't want to be a tax burden, and I think we're hopefully creating an environment where we're proving that to you guys. So we've asked in the past to upgrade some of our equipment, and thank you for that. We finally were able to get a few mowers in the last couple of years, which are doing a tremendous job. You can see on that second page that there's another ask in place this year. Golf car fleet, one of the best investments I know that we can make at a golf course, possibly the city. The last fleet that we received, we're currently using, they were 2017s, and the return on that investment happened in the first season we had them, and we ran them for 7 seasons, creating nearly $1 million in revenue. So they are getting tired. The maintenance for them is going up a little bit every year, so we're looking to trade them in, which all the vendors would gladly do because they're in great shape and they are maintained by Mike Portner, our mechanic, just does an excellent job on those. But that's one of the asks there, the net, and I believe you had the proposals, but the best bid was 184.4. That's going to be trading in 50 and purchasing 60. The reason for the increase, for a number of the large events, we'll bring in 10 additional cars. That's a minimum, when a lot of times we only need like 5 or 6 to accommodate the groups. That money all comes right back to us in greens, fees, and food and other ancillary items. But by increasing it by 10, we'll eliminate a number of those rental situations. And I don't know if you noticed it on the budget numbers there, but it's almost cut in half as far as our rental there. So that's going to be a good payback there as well. Otherwise, we're moving forward with some good increases. We don't want to price people out. I remember years ago in 2011 when we got the contract, my comment was, I want to make $1 million, but I want to make $1 off of 1 million people. And I think by keeping those fees in check, you can see how the numbers are gradually gaining. I think we're getting people to come down here and return and ultimately join. So we're raising all single memberships are just going up $20, $30 for the couples, $50 for the families. And when you spread that across the now 360 members, and we have a few that are interested next year too. Feel very comfortable where those are going. The greens fee increases as well, and that's all just looking at the bottom line. When we formulate the budget, we don't just throw numbers at it. We're trying to make sure that the revenues are in the right spot there. So. And we're still doing some, negotiating back and forth, so we're not with like a linen service and different vendors there. But otherwise, as a whole, personally, very happy with it. And again, appreciate the opportunity to manage it for you. We did some new software this year, and we're all getting used to it. But we got a few loose ends to tie up there. But other than that, a lot of the information is on here. A lot of it will, come back once we get to the year-end numbers and things like that. And I guess, my take is very happy with the operation, very pleased with staff, the product we have to offer as a resident for 54 years myself. Very proud of the golf course that this town has to offer, and hope to continue to manage it in the future. Anybody have any questions?
I just had one. Do you have an estimate roughly of adding that part-time employee?
It's it's in the neighborhood of 30,000. What I'm hoping to do, we had discussed a full-time situation, but I didn't feel that in the off season it would justify, the dollars or the benefits or things like that. So I'd like to look, internally, on a current employee to potentially increase their hourly rate. So I cannot see it exceeding $30,000, total. And it would be, like I said, we increased our number of members, number of events, so a lot of it is to, you know, I'm directly involved with all the events. A lot of it will be to make sure that we are maintaining competitive marketing behind the scenes, that we get City Hall, all their numbers, their invoices, things like that in a timely manner. And then, you know, to help, promote the events and things like that, where we've got nearly, well, since we were here in 2011, boy, we're over 100 additional members, and we haven't added staff. So that was the reasoning, just to provide better service, most of all communication, you know, with the city and things like that. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Did you want to go over the budget part now with us, or I see you have them divided out here? Separately.
No, yeah. This is certainly the opportunity that if you've got questions about things in the budget, we discuss
Okay.
them.
Did you want to go over the budget, or did this pretty much it?
It's entirely up to you guys. I mean,
Okay.
the numbers are on there. The one number that we added was we did an amortization on there, of the numbers that we presented, and it was considerably higher because, we were going to also ask for a piece of mowing equipment to the tune of, it was about $90,000 piece. That's not incorporated in here, so the budget itself that the golf board recommended, the payment schedule on there will be considerably lower. I don't know if that makes sense. It's a little different from the fund.
So what is being requested by the golf board would be to get a 5-year equipment bond worth $212,900, as I have that first bullet on the slide. And it would make up 2 utility vehicles at $28,000 and the golf carts at about $184,000.
Utility vehicles, just real quick, those are they're a dump style, maintenance vehicle that's multi-purpose for both, moving employees around the 110 acres and then, hauling and doing specific things there. So they're vital for the operation for some of the smaller projects and the, expanse of the property, so.
Yep, so I will say, I also included on the slide there, the payments that the golf board has. Basically, they've got payments for the next 4 years on various pieces of equipment. So next year, they've got a payment of a little over $74,000, and it drops off year by year until 2028. Their last payment currently is a little over $46,000. So that's what's currently sitting on the books. If we were to do a bond certificate next year, their first payment probably wouldn't come until 26. The typo, that should say 26 and 27, not 27, 28. But
Kurt, I've said, well, first of all, if I can just say a couple things, I really applaud you for the increase in membership. A lot of golf courses, and myself included, had concern is what's going to happen after COVID, and are we going to be able to keep the people we have, or are they going to fall away once they get back to their old cycle of recreational activities and things like that? So I think that you've shown that you're able to keep them and actually grow them. So that's fantastic. That's great. I don't know what other courses are experiencing, if that's the same or not. Do you have a comment on
Golf,
that?
it's, as far as, the membership, the returning, the annual things, that I'm not sure, but I know that the rounds of golf as a whole are up. I mean, I like to say we restocked the golf pond during COVID, and a lot of people are coming out, and it makes the job like I said, it's still hospitality, but we do have to, remind people of certain etiquettes and certain rules and, taking care of the property and things like that. So we're kind of re-educating them too, but we never had a COVID course when I went to my PGA management.
Yeah.
But I think we managed it pretty well. I was pretty happy with the amenities. If we didn't have the amenities, we were able to handle all that. Some courses didn't have I mean, something as easy as a crank out window, you know, things like that, but no, it's, I think the whole product is something to be pretty proud of, so, thanks.
And when you look at the fund balance of our golf course over the last few years, it certainly has done well. Robin and I took I would say, a quite conservative estimate on where we think that fund balance is gonna land here by the end of the year, using past years and what we know expenditures may be coming up. And we are estimating a fund balance on January 1st of $620,810.
Kurt, that's what I've been advocating for a long time, is to try to get the golf course to try to be able to self-finance itself. There's been years where the cities had to fund the seasonal spring shortages, things like that.
Yes, yeah, I think we're getting
And
close.
we've not had to do that for a while. And as you might remember, years ago, the city had to write off a lot of money because of losses in the past. So it is one of the biggest financial risks as an operating entity the city has. And that's why I usually advocate to be more watchful and mindful and monitoring it more closely than other enterprises and things like that. The budget that you have, I see, I take out the transfer in from the city because that's not really revenue, that's just funding, but the budget shows a slight increase in the loss for the golf course. I think we'll probably come in with a small loss this year again, but if you take out the city's transfer in. And I think next year you're projecting a slight increase in the loss. But when you consider the amount of increase in some of these expense categories that you're going to have to manage, I think you're doing it, I think it's looking the way it should, where you're increasing some of the fees. And if you have the numbers, the units go up or the rounds stay, I think that it'll help. So I applaud that you're increasing fees and trying to manage increasing some of those things with some of these expenses that are coming up.
Yeah, I mean, it's
higher.
tricky, cause you know, like I said, we can't make people come to the golf course, so it's hard to put an increase on it, cause they can golf wherever they want. So we gotta make sure we have a product for them. So our focus is gonna be on the expenses, and they're conservatively high, which doesn't really sound like the right thing to say, but we feel confident that we can manage, you know, within those requests and keep it below in virtually every category, but we just wanted to make sure.
Is there, I remember last year you had a special, it's not a big number at all, but a special
project line.
project thing. Maybe you changed the
I
name
think
of
it
it.
was $10,000.
Yeah, it was $10,000, and it was a maintenance line item, and if you see, it's the second page of the golf course fund. I know you guys have a number of pages there. We've actually taken that out just for the projection right now, but we've moved it. If you look up halfway through that area, there's a capital outlay where that money was just, it was kind of a Peter to Paul. We're in desperate need of some areas carpeted where it's becoming a trip hazard, so we shifted those funds there, just to make sure we didn't tack them on, you know, because we have to be able to make up for them.
I've advocated for us to reduce the amount of funding that the city puts in every year, and because my perception or goal is that hopefully we'll get back to the city being able, or the golf course being able to break even someday or not need it. And certainly it's going in the right direction. It has. I think 2 years ago we actually made a legitimate profit, and we had a small loss last year and we'll probably end up with a small loss this year too. But part of the way we would get there is when the city started putting money in, it kind of coincidentally matched up with the principal payments on some of the debt, and that's kind of where it's kind of started when some of the financial difficulties occurred. But as it gets better, then my rationale is that that's where we can reduce that number and hopefully manage that the golf course can manage the principal and interest and debt payments on its own instead of having the city do it. And that's where I guess my next question comes in. Do we have an estimate of the principal payments that if we did a certificate instead of them funding the purchase themselves with their golf fund,
Yep.
You suggesting we finance it then, or?
Yes, so Robin and I talked about it internally, and we are suggesting that we end up financing it, over 5 years. We did not run those exact numbers, I mean, over 5 years, 212,000, you're probably looking at around $45,000 to $50,000 a year, over a 5-year period, once you work interest into that.
I'm concerned that that number might get too high where they can't fund it on their own, that we cannot continue our goal of reducing the funding from the city to the golf course.
Yep.
And if they continue the financial performance they have right now, where they lose $49,000 or $50,000, you can add back depreciation and interest, it gets kind of tight there, so I'd be a little concerned. That's why I thought that maybe they could use some of their own cash, purchase this, and not increase the principal payment so much.
And we thought about that. Our initial thought was, well, if one of those rough years comes where maybe it just rains all the time, so nobody can ever get out and
Right.
golf, or whatever it ends up being, worrying about where that fund balance is at, if spreading those payments out over 5 years, if we generalize that we have most of the cash now by spreading it over 5 years, we do have to pay slightly more for it, but then we aren't as hit on it year over year. I guess looking at this, it's entirely possible we could say, hey, let's buy the utility vehicles, which is 28,000. We'll pay cash for those and split up the carts, knowing that those could be a real revenue generator just in the carts themselves. They kind of help fund themselves then over the life of that bond.
Yeah, I don't want to advocate that we have too much money, because we've been working hard to trying to get that much money, but even to get funds available to fund their seasonal ups and downs. And I've had a long history with golf courses because I've financed them over the years, but all the money is made in really 2 or 3 months, most of it. And we've had some great weather, and totally correct in trying to understand the risks of having shortages. I can't recall the biggest loss the golf courses have had, but maybe a couple $100,000, maybe 1 year, I don't know.
Yeah, I think back
Kinda
in
guessing.
2011, I think we had I think it was about 130,000 in the red when you guys moved away from a full-time general manager into a contract.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, but I'm not sure.
So to want to keep $600,000, I can't really argue against it, but at the same time, I'm concerned about the principle, us being able to kind of manage the flow of what we transfer over. You know, I think, what are we reducing it this year, 20-some thousand?
We're reducing it by 24, 25,000. It's going, we're down to like 97,000, I believe.
So if we did these additional principal payments, do you feel we could still continue that kind of a trend?
I would like to hope so. Like I said, next year we would basically start at that number, looking at it, assuming that we're gonna reduce it, and kind of see how the golf course is continuing to do, and how that would continue to look and play out. But the idea would be to continue reducing it going forward.
Right. So if they can't, then they can take it out of the cash or the funds on hand.
Correct. And like I said, if we were to bond for this, their first payments aren't gonna be until 26. And so we wouldn't even really, this wouldn't really hit their books until they've dropped down to 48,000. So I mean, by the time they're making payments on that, they'd already be down another 25,000 in principal.
Okay. Well, I want to be supportive, and I guess my last question is about this position, and more so for you, Josh, because you're in charge of administration for the city. But I think there's was a goal or whatever to try to bring a lot of work in-house with the city administrator years ago, and the golf course positions transferred over and things like that. Do you see this new part-time position something that can't be done in your configuration of the city administration the way it sits, that tasks can't be done in-house in a sense, or?
We could certainly look. I know that the finance department, as the city has continued to grow, as the golf course has continued to get busier, there just is more and more stuff to do all the time. I think about the finance department right now, and they are all pretty well slammed all the time. We've gotten slight reprieves, and I think we'll continue to see slight reprieves in the near future. With our new software system, should free up a little bit of time. I just don't know if it'll free up enough time to focus on the things that could help the golf course continue to get better and more marketable, I guess.
So is the position, I mean, so you're saying it,
So, yeah, I mean, I think this is really a position that it does kind of become a part-time, I don't wanna say clerical worker for the office, or for the golf course, cause I don't know if that casts it in the right light, but it's a lot of that. If you assume that the golf course was a larger entity, they'd probably have a couple people working just kind of on the marketing and or.
right?
Um,
And maybe this is a
staff.
subtlety, I'm not doing a good job of explaining that, but years ago, the goal was to pull administrative activities away from the golf course and bring them in-house to the city. If we're doing a new position, is it best for it to be an expansion of the finance department? Or do we go back on the road again where we're starting to build administration costs into the golf course? Do you know what I mean? So to me, it's
Yep.
more of a,
Yep,
it's more
no,
of a
yeah,
people
now
question
I'm
that the,
understanding. It's,
this city administrator needs to make sure that we're doing that, because it is a little bit of a change of what had been
correct.
planned in the past.
Correct. And that becomes a tricky question. I mean, I do know as we try to keep as much of the finances of the city centralized so we can checks and balances and keep everything. But I do believe that this position will also be doing some things that are much more golf oriented in terms of marketing and whatnot. And maybe this becomes something in the future where it does fold back more almost entirely into the city. And we have several employees across the city who kind of work for multiple departments, where they may spend time in one department today and the next department tomorrow, or maybe you're within one day you're working multiple departments. I think our finance department, most of them are split up amongst various departments. I don't know if we've done a deep enough dive yet across the finance department. I know there are certain public information officer type positions that I have thought about, especially in today's social media age where news spreads faster than you can type it. Having somebody who's more focused just on social media across the whole city would probably be very good. I don't know if we're quite there yet, especially as we're trying to make sure that we keep our budgets under control and responsible. But it's possible that eventually this position could fold back more into a full-time position that works more across the city. But if the golf course, as it's currently projecting now, can kind of fund this position for themselves and help get them rolling, I'm not opposed to it being a golf course heavy employee that eventually folds back into the greater system.
Well, I just want to bring up the issue because you're obviously going to be responsible
Yep.
for, I don't know who would have direct accountability if it's Kurt.
I
or
say,
if
yeah,
it's-
within the current system, the employee, like all other golf course employees, would report to Kurt. And then I would be kind of over the top of that. So ultimately, it all comes back on me.
Right. And you know more than I that overhead is kind of one of the most difficulties in a golf course because when it rains, you still have overhead. You don't have golfers, but you still have overhead. So adding positions is you still have to pay them.
It's a leap, yep.
Yeah, so, well, thank you. That's all I had.
Thanks, Kurt, you're doing a great job.
Thank you, appreciate your support.
Matt, I'm not gonna make you walk up there if you'd like to.
It's got 4 out of 5 bars. I'm gonna see how long it lasts. All right. So I'm gonna present the sanitary and storm. I'll do a little recap of the 2023 year. So we've had a lot of, I guess when you have this many moving parts at a waste treatment plant, you can have surprises all the time. So we obviously had that with our plant. It sounds crazy when I say it's getting older, but it is 13 years old and there's so many moving parts in there. So with that said, everything gets a little bit more expensive. But just the notables from the 2023, we just found out that we will be receiving an award from the MPCA for our treatment plant for our performance from the late 2022 to 2023. So that's great. The 4 guys are doing a great job down there. And they're stuck in a building 8 to 10 hours a day and nobody really sees them, but this city couldn't run without those 4 guys, so it's great. We're very lucky to have them. We installed a new mixer at 37. It's 10th Avenue, but it's the old 37 Chalupski Lady Slipper lift station. Those lift stations are the main areas that we receive restaurants, I'm gonna call it solids, just to make it sound a little bit better. And we've had a lot of issues in those lift stations until we actually purchased a mixer that it's constantly breaking everything up, and we don't have all the having to pull out pumps every 2 months. So it's been a major relief for headaches and everything when we go into those lift stations a couple times a week, and we don't have to pull pumps all the time. So that's been a great addition. We had a little bit of, well, actually, this year's the first year in a long time that we actually hired a company to come out and look at all of our lift stations, pulled all the pumps, checked out all the moving parts, and we had some maintenance, which we knew was going to happen out of that because some of our lift station pumps are older. And luckily, we were able to rehab a lot of those to keep the costs down, but it also is very nice to know the issues we did have before it becomes a major problem. So we did some rehab, some pumps in those 3 lift stations. We installed the new pump at number 3 just about a month ago at the bypass lift station. That's the main lift station behind the bus garage. Pretty much everything in New Prague, for the most part, comes to that lift station. So we replaced 2 of the main pumps last year, and this would be the 3rd pump, which is actually just in the bypass. It's a smaller version of it and a lot cheaper, but those are all 3 new. All 3 of those are new now, so that will be less headaches too, just because some of those pumps were 30, 40 years old, so they are working properly now. When it comes to the budget, we are projecting to draw $379,645 from reserves. I kind of will explain why that number is so high here in a few minutes. We're looking at increasing $118,000 roughly, or 3.34 into the projected revenue. I would like to increase rates at 3.5%. And I think it's one of those things that we did not raise rates for about 8 years until last year was the first year we raised rates to 2.5%. Everything is getting more expensive with COVID and everything else. I think we see it from the utilities to the wastewater to water to, I mean, everybody, line department. Rates have gone crazy when it's, price has gone crazy lately. So I would like to see a 3.5% increase to kind of offset. Again, we will be drawing into our reserves, but I think it's one of those we need to slowly get back to where we need to be and review that every year, but I would anticipate a rate increase every year at a small margin instead of one big margin. We are looking at an $88,000 increase in the budgeted expenditures. That breakdown is personal cost of 5.53% or $38,000. An operation cost of $44,000 increase, and that $44,000 actually is $46,000 increase on just chemicals this year. That's about 26% up from last year, and last year was a big bump. So chemical prices constantly are going up, and we every 3-4 months I have our wastewater superintendent price shop everywhere just to make sure we're getting the best price. And it's the same all across the board. So the big reason for the draw into the reserves is our debt service. You'll see $468,000 is due to the preliminary waste treatment plant loan payment is going up, and then about $50,000 to the CIP project. So that's the big reasons for the drawing into the reserves is that waste treatment plant payment increased in 2024. Storm's a little easier just to go through. We are projected to dip into the reserves 2.413%. I'm sorry, 2,413,000 in the reserves. Pretty minor, nothing I'm too concerned about. I would not propose an increase this year. We did propose an increase, or we had an increase in 2023 of 2%. I feel pretty comfortable where we're at, especially with our fund balance. And then the big increase for 2024 is the increase is $15,733, and the budgeter expenditures That's mainly due to the debt service interest increase. That's all I got for now, if you have some questions. I like that. Here we go, Bruce.
Move on to utilities.
Oh, you got one, Bruce, I'm sorry.
All right, do you have any questions for Matt or?
Nope.
All right, I'll get started. Just a quick note, the 2024 budget incorporates data gained from a rate study that was completed back in September by the Utilities Commission. Typically, the Utilities Commission hires a consultant to conduct a rate study about every 5 years, or when there are significant changes to cost of utility operation that would warrant rate adjustments. A rate study primarily serves two purposes. First, to make sure that the utility is taking in enough revenue to cover operations, debt service, and maintain cash reserves. And secondly, to make sure that rate classes are each paying their fair share. In other words, on a cost of service basis, a residential isn't paying more than a commercial or industrial rate class payer. The current rate study uses a 3-year forecast and rate adjustments to achieve the desired operational and cash reserve outcomes. So that's pretty much what we use to incorporate in the budget for 2024. Some of the notables for the utilities, I'm starting with the water here. In 2023, we replaced 1,600 feet of water main, and that was along the 10th Avenue project. That was not in the forecast for having to do that year, but we ended up having some water main failures in that area. And we ended up contracting that out, and that was about $400,000. That was kind of an unexpected expense, and we will just pay for those out of cash reserves this year. We replaced 3,700 feet of water main, 43 service lines on the Sunrise Avenue project that took place this past summer. We also replaced pumps and well piping for 2 wells, our number 2 well and our number 4 well, and those one was planned and one was unplanned. We installed fiber communications to the west water tower, and then we're looking to replace 3,700 feet of water main and 59 services on the Lexington-Lindale projects and the connecting streets in 2024. And some of the updates in regards to the 2024 budget, we're projected to add about $288,000 to reserves. And that's an increase of about $100,000 or about 5.6% in projected revenues. Really, that's part of our goal. Part of those is to incorporate those increases so that we can approach about 200% of our annual operating revenue to have in reserves. We're at about 2.5 million now, and we hope to get to around 4.2 million by 2027. That's kind of a number that's been floated around that both of our consultants and the commission has somewhat landed on, that is a comfortable level to be at to have cash reserves on hand. Rate increases, the rate increases between 3.9 and 5.2% for commercial and residential rates, and I'll get into that just in a little more depth on the next page. It's an increase of $45,000 or 2.92% in budgeted expenditures. We have a little bit of a decrease, $20,000 in purification. Primarily that is chemical cost. To Matt's point, chemicals last year, especially in the year before, were just going crazy. So I had somewhat overestimated chemical costs the previous year. So this year we hope that they'll stay a little bit more consistent, still consistently high, but hopefully not as bad as what I had projected the previous year. So we have a little bit of a reduction there. An increase in personnel costs, primarily just for COLAs and step increases for a lot of my staff in the water department are still in their step periods, or younger people. And increase of $5,000 in admin in general, and that's, that is kind of cast by a pretty broad blanket of computer support, plant maintenance, bond increase, insurance issuance cost. Those all are bundled into the admin and general costs. The next page, I wanted Josh to include this just to give you an idea of how New Prague compares in our rates to customers. I mean, rates are what they have to be, obviously, to cover a cost, and they're not always true to what the actual just pumping costs are. Some cities have incorporated new plants. So, for instance, if you kind of look at New Prague, we're currently at about only the third in the lineup of cost, being the cheapest. But you can see going into next year what our costs do step up just slightly. If you're kind of wondering what that is, it's about $1.65 per month for the average consumer that consumes about 5,000 gallons a month. And really what we're going to do starting the commission has proposed to start in 2024 is we're going to go to seasonal rates. So the rate for customers in the summer, the June through September time period, will be approximately $1 per thousand higher than the winter, I call it the winter months or the off-peak months. Really that is being kind of determined for us by the state. The state is starting to mandate that cities put in conservation pricing to help deter unnecessary use, we'll call it. But, and really that can be done in one of two ways, either through tiered rates, in other words, the more you use, the more the rate costs are, or if you can do it through seasonal rates. And that's what we're going to attempt to do for the 2024 season and see how that works out with our customer base. So obviously, people that have, that do a lot of watering, that's going to affect their rate a little more in the summertime than those that do not. But in essence, it also meets our requirements for the Department of Natural Resources. With that, I'll take any questions on the water department if there are any. Otherwise, I'll jump into the electric. Okay. On the electric utility, they were incorporated in the rate study also, and obviously there's a little more in-depth study that goes on with the electric side just because there are so many rate categories and rate classes that we bill for on the electric side of it. Again, in 23, the continued supply chain shortages, forced project changes, and pre-ordering. We're ordering transformers and materials 2 and 3 years in advance here. So planning for that is become strenuous at times. But so far we've been able to stay ahead of it, and I got to give staff credit for doing their best to stay ahead of those projects. We installed this past year 10,000 feet of new underground distribution lines, 26 transformers, 68 house services, and really that's furthering our goal to having our entire distribution system for residential services and primary services all underground. And we hope to meet that goal in the next 2 years here. We installed commercial services to MVE Biological Solutions and Bricks Boatworks, and currently working with Jeff Belzers to install a really large service for them for car charging. We implemented new software for our billing, accounting, payroll, and purchasing. That's going really well. I won't lie, there's been challenges, but staff has really worked hard to make it work, and we're working through those challenges, and we think in the end it's going to be a successful transition to that new product. The utility was one of 275 recipients of the APPA RP3 award, which really is an award of excellence for customer service, customer reliability, and safety. And again, we were one of 275 recipients of the 2,000 public utilities that are able to apply for that award. In regards to the revenues and expenditures, we're projected to add about $397,000 to the reserves. Again, we set some reserve thresholds through our rate study. We would like to get to about $5 million in reserves, or 50% of our annual revenue. Again, that was a number that's determined by our consultant and by the commission. And I'm very comfortable with those numbers with the current pricing of things. That's an increase of 474,000 or about 4.75% in budgeted revenues. The rates, again, it's a fairly modest rate increase, and these will probably stay true for the next 3 years. But it's an increase of 2% for residential rates, 1% in commercial rates, and 2.3% for industrial rates. You might ask, why are they different? Just that the rate study showed that some of those classes were paying too much or not enough on those individual rate classes. So we try to even those up by having different percentage increases going forward. Again, that will generate about $10.5 million in revenue. And that's up slightly over the previous year. That's an increase of 579,000 or 6.10% in budgeted expenditures. Some of those increases are 159,000 in purchase power. Again, that's somewhat my estimating in regards to taking some averages and to know what the weather is obviously a big predictor in what's going to happen in regards to how much wholesale power I have to purchase. We have an increase of nearly 150,000 in the SIMPA, and that's O&M projects and large capital projects that is going to be performed at the power plant this coming year. Again, those are in and out costs. We're reimbursed 100% through our wholesale power contract for those expenditures. And then we have an increase of about 197,000 in personnel cost. Again, I have a very young staff. That's 3 new apprentice linemen. Really, I'm not able to hire experienced linemen due to pay and benefits or take them from other utilities. So when I do have apprentice linemen, and according to our step policy currently with the linemen, I need to push those through in about 4 years in order to get them towards top pay. Otherwise, I lose them to neighboring utilities after we have trained them up. So that's primarily the added cost in personnel. And then also we added, one of my linemen also picked up benefits, family benefits this year. So that's a little bit of a change for us also. Again, I gave a graph just that compares us to some of our neighboring utilities, just as a comparison to know what our customers' out-of-pocket costs are. Again, New Prague sits fairly good or right in the middle almost, but so if you're a consumer that is based on 800 kWh per month for the whole year, and that is about our system average. So our customer is paying about $120 in electrical cost, consumption cost per month. And you can see that ranges all the way up to Xcel Energy at $138 a month. Again, the other utilities, these are 2023 rates, so the other utilities I'm hearing even as much as 4% and 5% rate increases for the coming year, due to, especially if they have a lot of plant to build, just due to materials that have gone through the roof. Just to give you an idea what the rate impact or a 2% rate impact, I'm talking residential here now, for the 2024 customer cost. If you're a 650 kWh per month consumer, your monthly bill will go up just over $2.02. If you're a 1200 kWh, say you have a large family and or it might be during the summer, then your bill would go up about $3.72 a month. Our base charge of $15.82 will go unchanged in 2024. That's my 30,000-foot outlook of the budget for the water and the electric, and whatever questions you'd have, I'll try to answer them.
Thank you, Bruce.
Yep.
I want to thank you, Bruce, and thank you guys too. You know, they're out there working in this weather and stuff, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I will just quickly highlight the ambulance. Not a lot going on over at the ambulance since we've got that contracted out. We actually do have a kind of end of the year meeting with them here in 2 weeks. And so after that meeting, I'll certainly bring the update from them kind of as we share the quarterly update with you guys. But in terms of budgets for next year, we are projecting to add a little over $7,000 to the reserves. with our revenues remaining consistent and a slight increase in budgeted expenditures due to known insurance costs that we have that are going up. But that is really what the ambulance budget is at this point, is us budgeting kind of for building repairs and for revenues to be collecting from them. So I guess, are there any questions for any, whether it be myself or maybe you got more questions for Kurt? I know he was feeling. If not, and you certainly think of some, like I said, we're not looking to approve any of these budgets tonight. It was more to get them in front of you so you can have some time to look at them and hear from the departments and not be here quite so long on Truth and Taxation Night.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, then we'll move on to the assessment deferrals.
Yes, so with the approval of the assessments, people did have 14 days after October 27th, when they were approved, to request a deferral. That submittal date was November 7th. We ended up having 3 assessment deferral applications. One of them was income-based, which according to the policy states administrative to protect privacy of people and the paperwork they have to submit. And we are still working through confirmations on that paperwork. But the other 2 are before you, and they're requesting deferral due to the age policy of being 65 years or older. As stated in your packet, that is Marilyn Sindelar submitted for 205 Sunrise Avenue North, and Susan Kennedy submitted for 107 Sunrise Avenue Northeast. Of note, Susan Kennedy did not submitted her application on November 15th. I said I would bring it before you so that council could make the determination. As I said, our policy states 14 calendar days after the approval date, which would be November 7th. But as it is policy, it is something that the council does have the ability to go one way or the other. Our absolute hard deadline is November 27th, because that is the day we have to get it to the county by. So we haven't missed any hard deadlines because of that, but I would leave that up for you. I guess my recommendation would be to accept the application as they were able to get it in, and it's not like we're missing a super hard deadline or have to come back and discuss this at a later council meeting. But it would be up to you all.
Thanks. Well, I'm certainly in favor of approving both of the deferrals for 205 Sunrise Avenue North and 107 Sunrise Avenue Northeast. Is any discussion, any concern?
I make a motion to approve the assessment deferrals for 205 Sunrise and 107 Sunrise Avenue
Second.
Northeast.
So,
We have a motion, we have a second, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries.
These deferrals are until the property is sold, is that it?
So it is basically until the property changes hands or but they must be paid within 30 years according to state statute.
Thank you.
All right, and we'll move on to the golf contract.
Yes, with the looking at the budget, I figured you guys would want to look at the golf contract as well. We don't have to necessarily approve it tonight, but I figured I'd get it in front of you so that if you had any questions. It is substantially similar to previous year's contracts, other than a change in compensation in section 3. It is a 6% rate increase over last year's rate. And I guess Kurt is also here, so if you have any specific questions about that, but otherwise, like I said, we don't necessarily have to approve it tonight, but I do know that this contract has been worked into the golf budget and received recommendation for approval from the golf board.
Any discussion?
not right offhand.
And it's a 6% change, right? Or
6%.
Cents, that's right. I don't really have questions about that part of it. I have asked before, and it just, one of your responsibilities is to maintain customer service, and I've wondered if you've done any kind of actual surveys of the members at the end of the year or something. You know, occasionally I'll get someone, I used to be on the golf board, so I know how this works sometimes. You get people complaining about this or that or the other thing. And so and normally, as a city council person, I just hear those kind of things. You don't hear the good stuff. So I just wonder if you guys have actually measured customer service in some ways or sent surveys out to anybody?
We haven't, I guess, personally, when the events tell me to book them next year, and when the membership goes up by strides every year, I guess that's my survey, but we can certainly put something together if anybody wants to know specifics. I just feel like in the last 3 years, it's been progressing, and to me, that's important.
Yeah, I think those are good parameters, but just like anything else, if we're responsible trying to see if you're actually maintaining and complying with your agreement, it'd be nice to have something solid and something the board or anyone else can, and actually for your purpose too, if you want to improve on your performance in some ways, what are suggestions some people might have, just like anybody that works for anyone else, you like to get some feedback sometimes of what it is. But I would just toss it, I'm just tossing it out there again as I did in other years, if the board would like to consider any kind of a survey of some sort in some manner.
I think it's something Kurt and I can certainly discuss. I know with technology, we have more tools than ever to be able to get that information. I mean, I think the big one I even have seen the last few years is at the exit, people have like a little electric panel with a smiley face, a sad face, and a neutral face. They just want to know good, bad, or indifferent, and they're able to glean. So, I mean, there's options more and more to try to just engage feedback as much as possible as people want to tell you how they feel without taking more than 5 seconds to do it. So,
Yeah, I just have to consider it. I mean,
yeah.
sometimes you get some very positive things, and it'd be nice to give it attaboy sometimes and that kind of thing, so. And for your employees as well, if some people compliment them, you like to be able to say that you got the compliment and pass it on to them, so.
Yeah, I point to do that all the time.
I would support the contract, except I just feel that because Sean's not here and he's on the board,
Yeah.
maybe we should
Yep.
wait.
Yeah.
But I don't know what you guys feel.
And like I
What do
said,
you guys think?
Just bring it back.
generally budget approval will be at the second meeting in December, so just need to have it all wrapped up by then.
No, I feel the same way, Bruce, just to have a full council, so, but otherwise I have no concerns with the contract. Okay. Miscellaneous, any questions about the park board minutes, the planning minutes, any items that are not on the agenda? I'll go around the room. Rick, is there anything that you have? Bruce, do you have?
Matt, I think I might have asked you before, are you okay with the roof on the library now? Has there been any other issues with the rain coming in or anything?
We have not after we fixed it. You know,
Okay.
like I think I told you, finding a needle in a
Yep.
haystack with those rubber roofs, but we
Yeah.
talked to Lori there. We haven't heard any issues with water coming in or anything, so I feel confident that we fixed it. But again, I think a lot of those leaks show up in the winter when you got ice kind of built up a little bit on there. So it's something that we keep an eye on for sure. But Lori is aware of it to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, some of the damage to the trim on the sides, how it's got water damage now. I didn't know if you were gonna put that in next year's budget to try to
That's
correct
in
that, or
the.
do you wanna wait a while to make sure?
It's nothing too costly. I think a lot of that is sanding it down and restaining it. And, you know, obviously we'll have to replace some of the boards that are too far along, but it's more manual work than anything, not a huge increase to the budget. But that is actually listed. We have a list of winter projects, and that's under one of the winter projects.
Okay, great, thank you.
Matt, do you have anything additional?
I do not.
Tim? Bruce? Robin? Ken?
2 things.
Nope.
No, all right, never mind. No, so one thing that is being talked about kind of on the back end of scale right now amongst the administrators is that with the fluctuations in insurance costs that people are seeing constantly.
What kind of insurance?
Health insurance.
Okay.
Health insurance amongst employees. There is discussions as to would it be worth looking into a feasibility study, or would the cities and or county be interested in potentially pooling all of our employees and going to more of a self-insured model? It is something the county is already kind of exploring with Shakopee a little bit. and they kind of extended it out, are other cities interested? Right now, they're working with Gallagher, who is our kind of insurance agency, to do a feasibility study on that. And so I guess I would just, is the city council interested in, really at this point, it's just exploratory, and Gallagher wants to see what cities would be interested in potentially being included in this study, just to see how it may affect us one way or the other, and whether it would be worth going in later. So I guess I just wanted to gauge your guys' general feedback. If I tell them, yeah, we are certainly interested to see if it would help us out as a city. I don't have any details beyond that at this point, but I guess, is there any opposition to just kind of that exploration a little bit?
Oh, I think it's great. You know, anytime you can get information,
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
possibly lower your costs.
The other thing I have, and I see Bruce has pulled his out, tax levy amount. So, for those that would have received their tax levy statements on the Scott County side of New Prague, you may have noticed that the proposed preliminary levy is right around $3.9 million, which is about $1.2 million lower than it should be. Through what appears to be a miscommunication between our staff and Scott County staff, it has appeared $1.2 million short. The LeSueur side is the correct amount that the city council approved. So we are working with both Scott County and Kennedy and Graven to figure out how we can fix this. I know both Kennedy and Graven and Scott County have already reached out, or will be reaching out tomorrow, to the Department of Revenue, as there is language in state statute to get this fixed. It's just a matter of taking the appropriate channels, and it looks like speaking to I think their official title is the Commissioner of the Department of Revenue or something like that. So we are going through that process to get it fixed. Like I said, it seems to be a miscommunication, because all of our approvals and everything that we've always talked about has been right around that 5.1 million, and it has been reported on the Scott County side as 3.9.
So our taxes aren't going down.
So taxes are not going down as much. That was Mayor Jurek's exact response when I talked to him this morning. Is at our current proposed levy, they should go down, not nearly as much as they are being reported as going down.
And they're already sending out the notices?
Well, I think they send out the preliminary notice usually in early to mid-November. So, if I haven't checked my mail for a few days, I'm guessing LeSueur's, if it's not in the mail yet, will be in the mail sometime this week. But yes, so the LeSueur County side is reporting correctly, the Scott County side is not. So,
They came today, I think.
oh, there you go.
All right.
So if you guys hear something, that's what's happening.
Okay, thank you.
So, but I'll keep you guys informed as we go about that.
So it reflects on the statement, 18.53% decrease, and
That is incorrect.
that's what caused me to.
Yeah, that's what caused you to email me, and then I called you at like 8:30, and I'm like, he probably doesn't want to answer because it's 8:30 on a Friday night.
I was in a play.
Okay, but yes, so that's, like I said, I'll keep you guys informed kind of what's happening with that, so that way if you guys get questions, you can share them.
Thanks, appreciate that. Well, with that, I would take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we will be moving into a special meeting, so
Yes.
thank you, everyone.